I have the entire C-suite, the whole team together, and we're talking about maybe a new initiative that they want to point out. And they're all on board and they're all on the same page and they're team one and we're going for it. I will stop the conversation at that time. And if we're in a conference room, I'll say, okay, I want you all to stop right here. And I want you to leave your personas, your titles, your names, everything behind. And we're going to go to a different conference room. And we're going to walk in there and we're going to pretend that we are the directors. And we're going to look at this from their perspective. Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm so glad to have you here for another episode of the Care to Lead interview series. Today, we're going to be discussing one of my favorite topics, and that is the importance of empathy in leadership. I think it is sometimes just used as a buzzword, and it is so much more important than that. Today, we are joined by Christa Curtis. She is the Vice President of Global Marketing and Communications at Cook Medical. She's an Indiana University graduate. She has 30 years of experience in marketing and communications across media, tourism, wellness, and healthcare. Christa leads a team of over 230 members, managing brand strategy, customer experience, corporate communications, and many other areas. She has also served as president of the Greater Ellettsville Chamber of Commerce and co-chairs the Envision Ellettsville Advisory Board. Welcome, Christa. I'm so glad that you're here.
Thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here.
So I'm excited to talk to you. First of all, I'm in a family of physicians and med students and all of the above. And sometimes I think in the medical community, there's two things that are happening. And correct me if I'm wrong. I think most people who go into healthcare have empathy. Like they're going in, they seem to be very empathetic. And at the same time, the physicians who are sometimes very analytical and get to the point, and they seem to, I tease my husband all the time and I say, do they not teach you people skills in medical school? So tell me what you found in working in healthcare.
I think that people go into healthcare go into it because there's a larger purpose that they're connecting to. I think whether we're a medical device company, so we tend to be more on the supplier side. We're supplying devices to physicians so they can do what they need to do to help patients get back to living. But anybody, whether you're talking to a medical device company or a clinician in a care setting, or even a supply chain or a business, someone who's more focused on the business of healthcare, I think people get involved in it because it's bigger than you. You feel like you're doing something that's impacting people in a positive way. But the fact of the matter is everybody in that ecosystem, that healthcare ecosystem, are still just people. We all have our strengths. We all have our personality styles. Some of us are better at communication than others. That's just a fact of life. But I do think, having said that, I think there is more focus than ever on that patient experience and how do we all work together to make sure there's a positive patient experience, whether that's better outcomes, the right information to make decisions. Everybody wants to make that better.
I agree with you. I think across the spectrum, that's what I've seen in my work with executives as well. I think it's hard for people, especially in professions where you're constantly faced with hardship and tragedy and struggle, and remaining empathetic can sometimes be hard. Sometimes it's important, like you feel like you need to put up a wall of some sort to protect yourself. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, so first of all, I would never want to put myself in the position of, empathy is all about understanding someone else's perspective, right? But I've never been a clinician. I've never been a physician who's had to deliver hard news, who watches the decisions I'm making having such an impact on people and people's lives. So I would never want to put myself in that position and speak for a physician. I do know that even through the pandemic, we heard some hard stories about what clinicians faced. It was really difficult to listen to those things. So having said all that, I'd never want to pretend that I understand what it's like to be in their shoes. But I do think it's difficult.
I agree. And I think you said something really important there. And that comes to, in my opinion, kind of the root of empathy, right? People confuse empathy with thinking, well, in order for me to truly understand what a physician might be going through in COVID, or what someone else might be going through in their circumstances, that they have had to experience the same or something similar. And that's not the case at all. With empathy, I think the importance is digging deep into your own psyche, knowing yourself well enough to know what pain feels like, whether it's stress or whether it's uncomfortableness, whatever it is, you have experienced it in your life. So when someone else is going through it, it's tapping into that understanding without having to psychoanalyze, without having to say, I understand how you feel, because we don't. It really is understanding how we feel and then being able to put that compassion into whoever we're dealing with.
I agree with that. And I think in doing so, you often find common ground with people.
Mm-hmm.
So let me take my COVID example and take it a little further. We've had, conversations with other folks in healthcare, whether it's a clinician or it's someone in the supply chain side. And we have expressed from our perspective as a medical device company, what going through the pandemic was like for us as a company. And in doing so, they would then share, and we would find there were common feelings. We may not have exactly the same experience, but I remember those conversations being, I didn't know you went through that. I didn't know you went through that. And that was a difficult time. So I may not be in your shoes, but I can understand some of those feelings. So as a medical device company, we were experiencing things like, we saw a 40% drop in revenue in a 10-day period because procedures stopped. And so we were trying to take care of our employees. Are our employees safe? Should they be in the building? Should they not be in the building? How do we make sure that we can keep consistent work for them? How do we make sure that we know what devices the clinician's going to need in their hand? And so that instability and those feelings, very similar. If you were going to talk to someone working in a hospital, their experience might have been a little different, but they were feeling the same things. Those feelings of instability, those feelings of we've got to protect, right? We've got to protect our employees. We've got to protect patients. So you find common ground, I think, even though the details of the experience are a little different. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I think that's critical in so many areas of the world today, is trying to find common ground. I think that's a critical concept and topic. Now, as we transfer this into, I started, obviously, the healthcare and physicians and so on, but I'm curious as we think about it from a leadership standpoint. And I work with leaders every day, different levels. And I often find that leaders believe they're totally empathetic. I'm not always sure that they understand what empathy is and the difference between empathy and sympathy. And I'd like to know if you'd like to expound on that.
Well, I think it's ongoing work, right? I try to think of myself, just as you said, as an empathetic leader, but there are times I slip and I'm thinking about my perspective instead of the perspective of the person that I'm either trying to reach or on the other side of the conversation. So I think it's like a skill you have to practice constantly, because oftentimes when you're in conversations, whether it's leading a meeting or you're in a meeting with colleagues, your tendency is to want to sort of drive your agenda. And that is something you have to fight that a bit in order to be able to display empathy. So for me, empathy is the ability to put yourself in the other person's shoes, to understand their perspective. I lead the communications team here at Cook. And when you're a communicator, you have to do that because you're trying to communicate. Well, this is true for marketing too. You're communicating in a way where you're trying to influence behavior. And if you don't start with that understanding of your audience and put yourself in their shoes, you can't really get there. So I think empathy is sort of more natural to folks who work in marketing communications because of the nature of work we do.
I agree. It's funny, one of the exercises that I sometimes do with C-suite executives, and you would think at this level, why would you need to do this? But you really do, because it's that practice, as you said, and it's really rethinking. So what I've done with executives, I have the entire C-suite, the whole team together, and we're talking about maybe a new initiative that they want to point out, and they're all on board and they're all on the same page and they're team one and we're going for it. I will stop the conversation at that time And if we're in a conference room, I'll say, okay, I want you all to stop right here. And I want you to leave your personas, your titles, your names, everything behind. And we're going to go to a different conference room. And we're going to walk in there and we're going to pretend that we are the directors. And we're going to look at this from their perspective. And let's talk about it from there. Like, what are some of the fears they may have? What are some of the challenges they may have? What might they be experiencing? And it seems silly, but changing spaces helps the brain change perspective. And changing perspective changes everything.
Yeah, I could really, as you were talking through that, I can visualize so many experiences I feel like I've had that are similar to that, right? Like as a senior executive, you're thinking about what you're trying to drive towards, right? You've set strategy, you're trying to align teams to that strategy, and you're trying to drive forward. But you have to stop and understand what people are experiencing and how they're experiencing what you're trying to drive forward. You have to break yourself out of that. So I could see where physically changing your space would help somebody do that. Or you have to have somebody in the room. And I think this is important in leadership teams. You have to have somebody in the room who says, okay, this is great. Let's stop and think about where our employees are at, where are our customers at, how are they going to perceive this? What are they thinking about right now? What are they caring about? What are their priorities? And that's just good change management.
I agree. And I think even if that person's in the room, how they phrase the questions. Because when we say, what are they thinking? That's our assumption of what they're thinking. But when we say, okay, be a director right now. I do that with the directors. Well, for the most part, I work the C-suite, but my team works with the others. And when I have worked in the past with directors and downline people, and they're angry about, the company's always changing and this is happening and that is happening, I sit back and I say, what are your fears? And then now let's look at your direct supervisor. What are some of their fears? Who do they report to? What do you think their challenges are? And sometimes just asking those questions helps build that empathy that we're talking about. And it's not just sympathy, it's truly empathy by understanding. And the only way we can do that is, you said, put yourself in their shoes. The only way we can do that is to literally, figuratively, imaginatively do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Those are great questions. I love those questions. Now that I think about it, I think I've gotten some of my best results have come from understanding even who a person reports to, how they're getting measured. Like what are the set of metrics that are driving them? Do we understand that? What are their priorities? Do we understand that? Do we understand how they feel about this? I think those are fantastic questions. I think so. I like your point though about not assuming that you actually know the answer either.
Right.
Sometimes you have to go right to the well. You need to go and you need to seek that out.
I think when people we're doing a lot with change right now, right? I work in the space of, helping organizations with AI. I don't help them with the AI, but I help them manage the people, the change. And it's so much faster and so much more rapid now than it has ever been in the past. Like change management has been a struggle for hundreds of years. And now we have change management on steroids. Yes. Which means we have to, as leaders, step up our game like never before. And those questions that we ask have to be pointed and concrete, and we have to be listening for the right answers because it's just critical now.
I also find one of the things that I battle, and I think that other leaders battle too, is when you're listening, you're sometimes listening through your own lens. I'll have things that I'm concerned about, that I'm focused on, and I have to catch myself when I'm in meetings or conversations that, am I hearing what they're saying to me through the lens of what I'm concerned about right now instead of truly listening to understand? So I think that's an important piece of the puzzle too.
I often, leaders that I'm coaching, especially in one-on-one sessions, I'm often challenging them to, it is about listening, yes, but it's also about understanding that when someone comes to you with a problem, chances are very likely that what they're coming to you with is a symptom. So if you go into fix-it mode immediately and you say, okay, here's what we can do, and you're not helping them because they don't often know what the real problem is. So your job is to really listen to what they're saying and keep peeling back that onion and keep asking more questions. And if someone walks out of your office with an answer, you've probably done something wrong if you gave them the answer.
Yeah, I agree with that. Sometimes I tell my leaders that they have to, I liken it to being an investigative reporter. Put your assumptions out of your mind and just go into the situation to learn and ask as many questions as you need to ask to understand. And I have found even doing that sometimes that people get to the answer themselves just from the questions that I've asked. But you're exactly right. They come with the symptom, but then you start asking a series of questions and the true problem reveals itself. It's, that idea of asking the 5 whys. Get to the bottom of the root cause.
Yeah, I think leaders, sometimes, especially newer leaders, people that are promoted, as we always promote the people within, or we try to, and they get up to this new role, I think there's a little bit of like, I need to prove myself. I have all the answers. I want people to see how good I am in this role. And what I try to make leaders understand, or get leaders to understand, is once you're in this new role, you have 2 jobs. Like job 1 is your day-to-day job, making sure the organization's running, making sure the projects are getting done, making sure all of that is happening. Job 2 is you're leading now. So you've got to stop giving the answers and start coaching and molding the people that are under you. And they don't know that instinctively.
I 100% agree with that. I've been in my current role, it'll be 4 years in June, and just recently really thought about what has changed for me in those 4 years. And what has changed for me is large percentage of my time is spent coaching. It's helping people get to those answers themselves. I mean, sometimes you still have to clear obstacles so that teams can move forward, but I feel like large majority of my time is spent coaching.
Yeah, it's like you go from leading in front to kind of leading beside, or even leading from behind, where you're just like the support person, like cheering them on and removing the roadblocks and doing all of those things. And that, the only way you can be successful with that is to have empathy, to understand their challenges. It's kind of like onboarding. When you create an onboarding program for a new employee, often if you have someone create that onboarding program or thing, they just jump right in and start telling them policies. Like they don't even know where the bathroom is. So it's like we have to learn to develop our leaders in the very beginning of their leadership journey as though they don't know where the bathroom is. It's like, let's start from the beginning. And that's not insulting. That's actually good coaching.
Yeah. Onboarding is an interesting topic. If you don't mind, I'll talk about that for a minute. So I meet with every new hire. We instituted that about a year ago, and I have found that to be incredible for setting the tone, that people appreciate, like, number one, that I'm taking the time, right? It sends a message that I want to get to know you a little better. And that's what I do. Two purposes for that meeting. I want to know you a little better. Tell me a little bit about your life. Where do you live? Because, a lot of people are hybrid or remote now. So where do you live? What's your life like? What's important to you? Where have you been in your career? And then secondly, sort of set the bigger picture, because they're going to dive right into org charts and reporting and business plans and projects. And it's almost like, let's take a step back and let me tell you a little bit about the story that I tell new hires is, let me tell you a little bit about the journey of marketing communications in our company, all the way back to the beginning of the company. Where did we start? Where are we at now? And where are we going? And how are you a part of that? And make those connections. Because I found that was not happening. What was happening is people were coming in and immediately was diving into, where's my laptop? What systems do I need to get access to? What policies do I need to know? And no one was really helping that employee set the bigger picture so that all of those things that were happening, they could connect it back.
Yeah, they see how they fit into the puzzle. I think another great thing to add to that conversation might be why you like working there.
Oh,
they
that sort of naturally happens, good. I feel like.
Well, sometimes, but it's easy to get into this history and just you like working there and you feel like it's showing. But to say that, I've worked here for X amount of years and these are the things I like about it. It doesn't have to be all big, grand things. It could just be I love the way we do team happy hours once a month. Or, it could be whatever. And encouraging other employees on their first day with a new employee to share why they like working at the company. I think that's something that when you start something new, it's always a little bit you're a little bit like nervous. Like what do we get into here?
I agree with you. I actually just met with a new hire this morning. And I don't know how we got into it. I was trying to think through as you were talking, how did we get there? And I don't remember the doorway in, but I remember that I told her, I said, there's two things that I really love. First of all, I think she asked me about my tenure. And I said, working here is always like, there's always a new challenge. And I can tend to get bored pretty easily. And I've never been bored in this organization. There's always a new challenge that's put in front of me. And I told her the second thing that I love is the people, that we are a people-oriented company, people-centered, and people truly care about each other, look out for each other. We enjoy each other. And those are the two things that I love. And she immediately sort of she captured those two things and connected herself and her value to those. Her values to those things. So I agree with you.
That's wonderful. I think it's more challenging. It's getting more challenging with the divisiveness that's in our country and in our world right now. And I think that you're correct. It's like trying the common ground, trying to keep the parts of us that are similar at the forefront instead of the parts of us that are not alike, the things we disagree on. And sometimes it can be really challenging. So when you have an organization that is truly people-centered and people compassionate and empathy and empathetic, it's challenging as an employer to keep everyone on that same page all the time, especially in this divisiveness. What have you done in your organization, do you think, that helps just encourage that atmosphere?
A couple of things. I think that we always try to lean back on our values when those societal issues come up, those issues that can be divisive. We always lean back on who we are as a company. I mean, we're a 60-year-old privately held company, so we have a strong set of values. We always lean back on that in terms of finding the common ground. So that's very helpful. We're also very much a storytelling organization. We've been like this the whole time I've been at Cook. We have a strong culture, but we love to pass knowledge through stories. That. Yeah. And stories give you a great chance to get to know people. And so we tell stories about our employees. And what happens is you get to know a person on a different level. So even if I'm frustrated with you about a project, I know a little bit about you and you're still a person, and I can still connect with you and appreciate you, and we can work through those frustrations. So those are a couple things that come to mind.
And just for our listeners, she said stories, not gossip.
That happens, right? But we try not to be purveyors of that. You know, my comms team, we used to have a joke. A few years ago, we would start every meeting with, what's the gossip you're hearing? Because that's how we would know where the employees were and what they were talking about and what we needed to go address, what misinformation was out there. But we have a strong history of celebrating employees at Cook, telling their stories, not just celebrations at work. Well, what are some of the interesting things they do outside of work? Is this person an artist? Are they a musician? Are they giving back to their community in a really great way? And so we try to celebrate those.
Yeah, we are working with people, and we sometimes forget that they're coworkers. They're helping us get this project done. They drop the ball on something, but they're still people. And when we can keep that connection. Now, you mentioned values a lot. What are the values of your organization? Do you have like your core values that are set out to everyone? And
yes, and now you're going to test my memory. I hope I don't get measured on this later, but treating others with respect is really important to us. And that is especially important in this world where things can be so divisive, as you said. Continuously improving. We put an emphasis on quality because of the nature of what we do. Every device that we make is going to end up being used on a person. So we think a lot about quality. Transparency is important to us. So that's another one. I know I'm missing a few, but those are a few that we spent a lot of time. We developed those values. It was pre-pandemic. So maybe 5-6 years ago. And we spent a lot of time at that point saying, what have our values been in our 55 plus years of business? What of those need to carry forward, and what might need to be new in the modern world today? So transparency was one that we added, we felt was very important. Some of those others have been around, since 1960.
Oh, that's great. I don't think a lot of people recognize is when they are in a situation and they feel hurt or they feel angry or they feel it's like an emotional sunburn that someone just smacked and you feel triggered. What I don't think a lot of people understand is that what that is about is a core value of their own that has been squashed for a moment. And as leaders, it's important for us to kind of recognize that. So if someone has a core value, and it's really important for all employees to really understand what their own core values are. And those core values are not just global niceties. They're real, they're personal, they're yours. So in order for you to understand why and how you react in the workplace, it's important that you understand what your values are. So if Christa were to say to me, Cynthia, I think your ideas are just crazy and stupid and off the wall. And if to me a core value was respect, I would feel hurt. I would feel triggered by that statement. And when we're able to separate that and understand what that reaction is to, we understand our values. And we can then say, okay, wait, that just kind of steps on a value of mine. It's important to me to be respected. And then she can very easily like, oh, well, I didn't mean to disrespect you. I think you're an idiot. In a nicer way. But that I think people don't get to that root, that core values are critically important. So knowing that your personal core values align with your organization's core values is critical if you're going to be happy in the workplace. It's a long way to say that.
Yeah, I 100% agree. When I came to Cook 14 years ago, I had been through a couple of bad work experiences, including I had been working for a startup, and I was one of the last ones to get laid off. I didn't agree with some of the things that were happening there. And so I was really looking for my next step to be with a company that I could do just what you said. My values align with the company values. And if that fundamentally is not there, you've got a real problem.
Yeah.
You're not going to be happy at work. You're probably not going to be successful at work. But my core values aligned, and I think that's been part of why I've been able to be successful here. So I agree.
I think that's hard for people to wrap their arms around, though, when they have a job like that's being offered to them, and it's maybe the great salary, the great location, the great everything, and they're able to like say, well, it kind of aligns with they like this and that and the other, but yet maybe they are a company that does fracking, and against your values is fracking. Maybe it's everything, but you really have to look deep inside. Not that I don't have an opinion on that. I'm just saying, like, just pulled it out of the air. Yeah. But you have to have you really have to know yourself. And it all starts with knowing yourself.
Yes. And I think from my personal experience, it took me some time to know myself, to be honest. And one of the ways that I knew what I didn't want was I had a few bad experiences. If you don't know yourself, that's sometimes how it gets formed up. I did not like how that felt. I did not like how that leader led. I didn't like how I was managed here. And so that, for me, over time, I built those experiences up into, okay, this is the kind of leader I want to be. I look at my son. I have a 22-year-old who's hoping to graduate next spring, and I'm trying to help him with that now. What is important to you so you can find that from the beginning. For me, I didn't really have that. I sort of had to find my way. And I think I was, in my early to mid 30s before I had some of that figured out.
I can totally agree with you on that. It's the same. I share a story often about even as a leader, right? After I've gone through all these things and I know what I want to be, and I was an VP of HR, and I love like my role, and I'm going to be this great leader, everything I always want to be. And I thought I was. Then we did 360s. And it was funny because my peers and the C-suite that I worked with every day, they saw that. But when I looked at the downline people, it was like, she's not relatable, and she's not on our level, and she doesn't. And I was like, floor. I'm like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
I am so. But it's like that perspective again. And how are we showing up as a leader all the time? Like, was I being real with those people, or did I still have and this was early on in my higher level leadership roles. I learned very quickly that I have to show who I am authentically and with transparency at every level. And I can't just take that for granted that they know.
Yeah, I agree with that. One of the things that I found in my career was as soon as those two letters VP got put behind my name, I tell people stop talking to me. It's a lot harder when you're at that level of an organization for people to be willing to be open with you and give you that level of feedback. I'm always seeking it. I'm always trying to seek it. And which goes back to what I told you about even starting with every new hire. I want them to feel like they know me and they're comfortable reaching out to me, because you can't get that level of feedback unless people feel comfortable to give it to you. And it's harder. The higher you go up into the organization, it's harder to get that feedback. We do not do 360s here. So I have to find other ways to get them.
It's important also. You said a lot of your role is coaching. And one of the things that I learned as a VP, especially in HR, and now like for the past 11 years, having my own executive coaching company, what I learned is no matter how good your intentions are, no matter how good of a coach you are, when you are internal, you will never get the same trust and the same feedback that an external coach will get. Well, because no matter what, you have an agenda, and it's you're for the company. And I thought when I was doing coaching as a VP of HR, like I had great coaching skills. I'm a certified coach. Like I know how to coach, but I didn't realize until after I left that role and came in, and organizations bring me in to coach. They'll trust me, even if I'm coaching the entire executive team individually and as a group, they will share more with me than they would in the group or with each other.
Sure. I mean, I do think that the agenda piece is something that is there, and you have to understand it as a leader. And I think you also have to understand when that's driving your behavior. Like I said, sometimes you listen to things through your perspective and what you're trying to get done, whether it's a vision you have in place, a strategy. You have to be able to put that to the side. It's not easy to do.
Yeah.
And I do think also the higher you go up in the organization, the more that people feel like you have an agenda. I've also noticed when I was actually more of an individual contributor in the communications team, I could go into a lot of settings, like executive level settings, and I would ask questions because everyone just assumed she's asking questions because she wants to understand how to communicate it. And so people would more freely give me information than they do now. And so I see your point, and I do think
Yeah, and it's natural. And like I said, I didn't know it until I was on the other side of the fence. And it's an interesting concept, but empathy plays into all of it. And I think as you grow as a leader, like you said, you've gone through things you didn't like, you've experienced things, as we all have. We learn from all of those things. And maybe it's a positive thing about ageism these days, right? You bring a lot of experience to the table, and those experiences help you be more empathetic with people that haven't experienced them yet. And no matter what, you can't put an old head on young shoulders, but you can have that empathy in a different way, in a different level. So what would you like people to know about your company and your industry today?
Some of it I kind of said at the beginning. I think I want people to know that healthcare is a really large ecosystem of a lot of people, a lot of different types of companies and expertise that have to come together to make healthcare happen. And the people who gravitate to healthcare are people who want to have an impact on the world. That's the first thing I would say. I think what I want people to know about the company I work for is that I'm proud of this company. We approach things, I feel like, differently. We're privately held. We can take the long view. We're not driven by shareholders. We're very people-centered. I mentioned that to you. We just had a tour this last week with some customers, and this goes all the way down to our sales team. One of the clinicians said, if I'm in a room full of sales reps, I can see who is the cook person versus other people. We're driven by our values.
That's a compliment.
They feel that. I know. And so obviously, that also has meaning for me because I'm the head of marketing communications. So our brand and our brand reputation is very, very important to me. And the linkage between our brand reputation, our values, our mission, where we're headed as a company is all very important to me. So those individual interactions that you have with people who work here, whether it's customer service or sales or engineering, finance, HR, all of those individual interactions create the experience that people have with our company. And I'm really proud to say that we live by our values and that we care about people and we're always looking to do the right thing for our employees, for our communities.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Christa, for our listeners who want to learn more about your work, how can they connect with you?
Probably the best way is through LinkedIn. Look me up on LinkedIn. I love it when people reach out and want to talk about topics that we share common ground on. I get really excited about talking about leadership, building teams, helping people reach their full potential. Obviously, empathy, I think, is critical to all of that. So just reach out to me on LinkedIn and would be happy.
Thank you so much for spending time with us today. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in to the Care to Lead video series. If you found this episode valuable and want to stay updated on our latest interviews and insights, remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel or find us on your favorite podcast platform. Until next time, remember, leaders who care to lead.